Welcome to the Black Bibliophile podcast. The Black Bibliophile is a podcast where I, Jazz, read and talk about popular and little-known books, comics, zines, and authors. To quote Haruki Murakami, if you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking. And with that, let's start the show. Welcome back to the Black Bibliophile. This is your host, Jazz. And yeah, long time no see, guys. I know it's been about 2 weeks since my last episode. Life got a little wild, and I send my many apologies. But the show goes on. Let's hop to it. So for this week's segment of 2 books you should check out, I have the first one, Pleasure Activism, written and gathered by Adrienna Maree Brown. Here's the summary. How do we make social justice the most pleasurable human experience? How can we awaken within ourselves desires that make it impossible to settle for anything less than a fulfilling life? Editor Adrienna Maree Brown finds the answer in something she calls pleasure activism, a politics of healing and happiness that explodes the dour myth that changing the world is just another form of work. Drawing on the Black feminist tradition, including Audre Lorde's invitation to use the erotic as power and Toni Cade Bambara's exhortation that we make the revolution irresistible. The contributors to this volume take up the challenge to rethink the grounds and rules of activism. Writers including Kara Page of the Astra Lesbian Foundation for Justice, Sonia Renee Taylor, founder of This Body Is Not an Apology, and author Alexis Pauline Grums, cover a wide array of subjects, from sex work to climate change, from race and gender to sex and drugs. They create new narratives about how politics can feel good and how what feels good always has a complex politics of its own. I discovered this book when I went to the Free Black Women Library's Octavia Butler event at the Huntington Library last month, I believe. And I met a woman there named Bianca, and she has a People of Color book club, and this is the book they've been reading for this book club. So I checked it out on Hoopla. I'll leave a link in description below. I also wrote a pretty cool piece about it on my Patreon if you want to check that out. But I checked it out on Hoopla, and I've been reading it steadily, and I honestly do recommend this book. It completely changed the way I looked at being involved in politics and how I looked at activism and how I actually looked at my own pleasure, how I receive pleasure, how I experience it, and it's a really great book, and I just think people should check it out. And the second book is The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. Here's a summary. In a Tokyo suburb, a young man named Taru Okada searches for his wife's missing cat, and then for his wife as well, in another world beneath the city's plastic surface. As these searches intersect, he encounters a bizarre group of allies and antagonists, gripping, prophetic, and suffused with comedy and menace. This is an astonishingly imaginative detective story, an account of a disintegrating marriage, and an excavation of the buried secrets from Japan's forgotten campaign in Manchuria during World War II. I read Wind-Up Bird Chronicle about 3 years ago. I started reading the novel, which I purchased in Little Tokyo at the Kinokuniya bookstore. And the book is really dense, so I couldn't really get through it. Within 20 pages, it felt like everything that could ever happen happened, and I was just overwhelmed. So I went and got an Audible version of it, or an audiobook version of it, and listened to it. It was about 30 hours long. So this is a dense book, and it's very long, but it's extremely good, like a lot of Haruki Murakami's books. And yeah, I definitely recommend it. It's surreal and plays to this strange fantasy slash slice of life type vibe. It's extremely weird is the best way to describe it. It's weird. But I think for anyone who likes Murakami books and likes a little bit of the surrealism he sprinkles in with slice of life, you'll dig this book. So now, on to our author spotlight for this week. I've chosen Samuel R. Delany. Samuel Delany was born April 1st, 1942, and raised in Harlem. His mother, Margaret Carey Bond Delany, was a clerk in the New York Public Library system. His father, Samuel Ray Delany Sr., ran the Levy and Delany Funeral Home on 7th Avenue in Harlem from 1938 until his death in 1960. The civil rights pioneers Sadie and Bessie Delany were his aunts, and he used their adventures as the basis for Essie and Corey in the Atlantis model 1924, the opening novella in his semi-autobiographical collection Atlantis, Three Tales. He published 9 well-regarded science fiction novels between 1962 and 1968, as well as 2 prize-winning short stories collected in Driftglass, 1971, and later in I and Gomorrah and Other Stories in 2002. In 1966, with Hacker remaining in New York, Delany took an extended trip to Europe, writing the Einstein intersection while in France, England, Italy, Greece, and Turkey. These locales found their way into several pieces of his work at that time, including the novel Nova and the short stories I and Gomorrah and Dog and Fisherman's Net. After returning, Delany played and lived communally for 6 months on the Lower East Side with Heavenly Breakfast, a folk rock band. One of those members, Bert Lee, was later a founding member of the Central Park Sheiks. A memoir of his experiences with the band and communal life was eventually published as Heavenly Breakfast. Delany published his first 8 novels with Ace Books from 1962 and 1967, culminating in Babel 17 and The Einstein Intersection, which were consecutively recognized as the year's best novel by Science Fiction Writers of America. Calling him a genius poet, Elgis Burgess listed Delany with J.G. Ballard, Brian W. Atlas, and Roger Zelazny as a ground-shaking new kind of writer and leaders of the New York waves. I chose Samuel Delany because I recently found out about him and his work, and through my friend John. He was talking about him and his work, and I was completely intrigued with this black sci-fi writer that I didn't know existed. And it existed in a time where science fiction novels and books were primarily written by white men. So I was extremely, extremely taken aback by his story. So I decided to check out Babel 17 and Empire Star. They're both really great stories, really great books. And I recommend you guys either go to your nearest library and check out his work, or buy it at your local independent bookstore. I also found out that he wrote, I believe, 2 issues of Wonder Woman in the 70s, back when she retired her tiara or lost her powers and became a detective. He wrote that story, which I think is really cool. And yeah, check out Samuel R. Delany. Let's take a break. This week's book review is for We Are Never Meeting in Real Life by Samantha Irby. Here's a summary. Whether Samantha Irby is talking about how her difficult childhood has led to a problem in making adult budgets explaining why she should be the new bachelorette. She's 35-ish, but could easily pass for 60-something. Detailing a disastrous pilgrim/romantic vacation to Nashville to scatter her estranged father's ashes. Sharing awkward sexual encounters or dispensing advice on how to navigate friendships with former drinking buddies who are now suburban moms. Hang in there for the Costco loot. She's adept at poking fun at the ghosts of her past self as she's at capturing powerful emotional truths. So, We Are Never Meeting in Real Life is a book full of short stories or essays about Samantha Irby's life and her past. I heard about Samantha Irby when I went to, I think I mentioned this in a past episode when she was writer, my author spotlight, but I heard about Samantha Irby from Roxanne Gay when I went to listen to her talk. At the time, she was reading this very same book, and I love the title that We Are Never Meeting in Real Life. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pick this up and check it out. I have never laughed so hard reading a book. She is so great at her self-deprecating humor, and it's embarrassing / inspiring at how good she is at telling the reader basically everything about herself. I identified so much with a lot of her stories, and I don't know, the themes of the books are like resilience, family, depression, humor, and just being vulnerable, but also not mistaking that vulnerability for weakness. Like, from reading all of this, I know Samantha Irby is insanely strong, but also a woman who knows her weaknesses and isn't afraid to share that with the world. And I really enjoyed reading this book and laughing with her and sometimes at her, and then, sometimes cringing with secondhand embarrassment. I think my favorite parts of this book was there was a story in the book where she's talking about when she was living in her dorms and she had two bro friends / roommates that they had to go on a drive home for the winter, and she had to use the bathroom really bad, and they pulled over and basically she shit in front of these two guys. And it was probably the funniest, most horrific story I've ever read. And for that story alone, I think you should pick up this book because, oh my God. I also love her honesty with conjunction to the humor. Like, she talks about how her father was abusive, how dark her depression goes, how she truly hates going outside. She's very straightforward and doesn't sugarcoat anything. And I relate so hard to that, and I enjoy that. And yeah, I honestly don't want to go through each and every story, but for the majority of the book, I was side-splitting laughing. There are moments in this book that swing from gut-busting laughter to a vulnerability that makes you almost want to cry. When she talks about her cat, Helen Keller, in the beginning you can tell it's mostly sarcasm, but also not, that her cat is literally a demon and she hates her cat. But then towards the end, you can see how touching her relationship with Helen Keller truly was. And it took me off guard when I read that story and that conclusion to that friendship. And I think that's why I like this book so much, that it can go from her shitting on the side of the road to touching moments about her pets to hard conversations about parents and abuse and relationships to her pipes bursting in her ceiling and losing everything in her apartment. So it's a really interesting look at her life and how she goes through it and experiences it. And I honestly think everybody should go out and read this book. The book's called We're Never Meeting in Real Life, and author by Samantha Irby. And yeah, you guys definitely should go pick this up. Check it out on Libby. Go to your local independent bookstores and buy it. Support Black authors. It's a great book. You will not be sorry. And now, time for a brief moment in comics. This week's brief moment in comics, I mentioned on my Instagram, is Ngozi Ukazu's Check Please, Book 1, #hockey. Here's a summary. Eric Biddle may be a former junior figure skating champion, vlogger extraordinaire, and very talented amateur patissier, but being a freshman on the Samwell University hockey team is a whole new challenge. It is nothing like the co-ed hockey back in Georgia. First of all, there's checking, anything that hinders a player with possession of the puck, ranging from stick check all the way to physical sweep. And then there's Jack, his very attractive but moody captain. A collection of the first half freshman and sophomore year of the mega popular webcomic series of the same name, Check Please, #hockey, is the first book of a hilarious and stirring 2-volume coming-of-age story about hockey, bros, and trying to find yourself during the best 4 years of your life. This book includes updated art, and a hilarious curated selection of Biddy's beloved tweets. So let me give you a little bit of a background about the Check Please's author. Check Please is written and drawn by Ngozi Ukazu, a graduate of the Savannah College of Art and Design. Ukazu can't skate, but has shown to have a large amount of knowledge on hockey and hockey culture. She credits this to 3 months of research she did at Yale, as she was writing a screenplay, Hardy, starring a hockey player who falls in love with his best friend. Ukazu describes Check Please as a somewhat of a reaction to Hardy. As her screenplay was rather depressing, Hardy featured themes of addiction, externalized and internalized homophobia, and the anxiety of graduating and feelings of failure. Ukazu described Check Please protagonist Eric as born to balance that out, and she suggested that Check Please conceived out of the question of whether someone like Biddy can survive in a world like Hardy's. Ukazu's ice hockey stories are inspired by narratives built around hockey players such as Jonathan Toews, Sidney Crosby, and Patrick Kane. Gavia Baker Whitlaw of the Daily Dite describes Kazu's relationship with her webcomic as though Kazu herself is a part of the fandom. In 2015, Ukazu launched a Kickstarter campaign in order to publish a first volume for the webcomic. Due to its large fan base, Check Please quickly reached its initial goal of $15,000, eventually making $74,000. A second Kickstarter campaign was launched September 2016, raising nearly $400,000 on a $32,500 goal, becoming the most funded webcomic on Kickstarter. In June 2017, it was announced that the second books would publish the 2 volumes of the webcomic. So, Check Please, I've heard about this comic for ages. I've been, in comics for a long time, and it would just pop up in Twitter or Tumblr or wherever, and I would see the art for the book. When they released the first volume with second, I saw it when they announced it, and I was like, this is super interesting. I'm not that into hockey, but I do like violent sports. So I was like, maybe I'll check this out, not knowing at all what it was about. And it wasn't until, I want to say last week, I saw Check Please for sale at my local comic book shop and ordered it immediately because I was determined to read this book that everybody's been talking about. So I got it in the mail because my local comic book shop is really not that local. It's like in New York, but where I live, there isn't a great comic book shop that I would like to support. So, you just got to do what you got to do. Anyways, it came in the mail and I read it in one sitting. Ngozi's characters are engaging, funny, grounded, and they seem like people you could definitely hang out with. I love Biddle. He's a Southern former figure skater that's getting into hockey but is afraid, and who's really into this team and being a part of a team and his teammates and the whole world of hockey, but is again afraid of getting checked on the ice, which is like being bumped, or basically all the physical parts of hockey that hockey is known for. He's afraid of that part. And I like how it's not this extremely masculine type jock book. It's more like these guys just love hockey, love their teammates, and just want to win as many games as possible and go to the championships. While Biddy, Eric, the main character, loves to bake and vlog about the whole experience. And of course, there's like sexual tension and a mini romance going on with Jack, his captain, which I didn't quite notice until like the middle of the book. It's quite a large book, but I really enjoy how Ngozi, built up the characters, built up Eric and his family and his love of making pastries and cupcakes and brownies and treats for his teammates. And then before you know it, you're so immersed in this world of Check Please that, yeah, the romance came out of nowhere, but actually at the best time, because the moment you start to see the kind of attraction between Jack and Biddle, you're like completely submersed in this world and like, all right, man, y'all should probably date or something. So I loved this book. I really enjoyed the back matter, all the extra bits where you see the art and you see the extra comics of Biddle's tweets. And I think it's completely worth checking out. I know that you can probably get it at your local comic book store. You can definitely get it on First Second's website. I'll leave a link in the show notes. But yeah, check out Check Please, because that book is definitely what's up. It's so good. And now, last but definitely not least, let's hop into the zine corner, where I am focusing on James the Stanton's I Think Our Friend Dan Might Be a Dolphin, published by Silver Sprocket. So this story is just described on the website as a mystery from Nartoons creator James the Stanton. It's a short zine about the narrator thinking that their friend Dan might be a dolphin. That's literally the extent of the whole zine. And the art, James's art, is amazing. Dan is most definitely a dolphin, but it's interesting on how they start to think, you know, he probably is a dolphin. There's moments in this awesome zine where they start to notice, and let me just read a couple pages. I first noticed the blowhole stains when I ran into him at Hot Wing City last Monday. He tried to pass it off as back sweat, but there's really no mistaking a blowhole stain on the back of a shirt. I actually just read on the internet that blowhole stains on clothing are the number one reason for dolphins who think their people to be discovered as actually just dolphins. And there was something glistening in his eye on Monday that felt explicitly nautical. Seeing him there catatonically, slathering himself in hot sauce, it was clear to me that he was built for the sea. So, and the art is fantastic. Dan looks like a deranged dolphin in a button-up shirt. I don't know how else. If you can imagine a deranged dolphin in a button-up shirt, that would be Dan. And the comic goes on with the narrator trying to explain how they're pretty damn sure Dan is a dolphin. And I just love this book. It's, again, published by Silver Sprocket. It's $5. I got it from my local comic book shop also. And it's just a really great book that is just a quick read that's hilarious. It's not for children. It's definitely not for children. Don't let children read it. It's not kid friendly because it has, as they say on the website, drugs and wangs. So yeah, I think you should definitely try to pick this up. I'm sure you can order it from Silver Sprocket's website or have your local comic book shop order it for you. But yeah, please go read this zine. If you want just a quick read that'll make you laugh, I Think Our Friend Dan Might Be a Dolphin by James the Stanton is what's up. And yeah, that's the end of our show. You can follow me on Instagram at the Black Bibliophile. You can support the podcast by going on our Patreon and becoming a patron. I have a monthly book club that I do every month. We read a book and we talk about it. And I also post special episodes and little essays about books that I feel like you guys should know about. So yeah, you can definitely send us any questions, any zines, or just tell us you just hate the show at theblackbibliophile@gmail.com. I check our emails every week, and yeah, hope you guys have a good one, and can't wait to talk to you again next week. See ya.